Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show that cuts through the noise and gets straight to the insights you need. Today, we're tackling a challenge that, honestly, it touches every single one of us. The sheer difficulty of making positive changes stick. You know the feeling, don't you? You've had that moment of clarity, that resolute decision. This time, I'm going to finally break that cycle, or maybe I'm going to commit to this healthy new path. And for a day, maybe even a few days, you're absolutely fueled by that conviction. But then, almost imperceptibly, those old, ingrained patterns, those familiar pathways in your brain, they start to pull you back. Before you know it, that powerful resolve begins to waver, and you might find yourself right back where you started, wondering how it all slipped away. It's like trying to turn a massive cruise ship in a busy harbor. You know precisely where you want to go, you can see the destination clearly, but getting that immense vessel to change its course, even just a few degrees, it requires a sustained, deliberate, and sometimes, frankly, overwhelmingly monumental effort.
And that profound feeling of inertia, that magnetic pullback to the familiar, that's exactly what we're going to deconstruct and, more importantly, learn to hack today. At the very heart of this struggle lies a powerful psychological principle, one that thinkers like Robert Cialdini have explored extensively: our deep-seated, almost primal need for consistency. This isn't just a quirk, it's a fundamental bias, an inherent drive to align our current actions with our past commitments and, crucially, with our perceived identity. Now, this bias, it can be a real trap. It can keep us stubbornly anchored to a negative self-image or perpetuate old, unhelpful habits that we desperately want to shed. But what's truly fascinating here, what makes this deep dive so exciting, is that this very need for internal alignment, this powerful drive for consistency, it also holds immense potential to be hacked for profound personal growth, and for you, our listeners, specifically for your journey of recovery.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, we're taking this inherent human tendency, this desire for consistency, and we're going to kind of flip it on its head. Instead of it working against us, keeping us stuck in those old, uncomfortable ruts, we're going to explore how we can consciously, strategically use it. The idea is that by making even the smallest, most manageable commitments, just a single yes to a healthy choice, a single step towards recovery, we can build an incredibly powerful, almost unstoppable momentum. It's about psychologically paving the way for a brand new, recovered identity, brick by consistent brick, decision by intentional decision. Is that about right?
Precisely. Our mission today is to equip you with a deep understanding of this powerful human bias and to provide you with practical tools to leverage it effectively. We want to help you transform this inherent drive from a potential trap that holds you back into a dynamic springboard for lasting positive change. Throughout our conversation, we'll explore how this plays out in the very architecture of your brain, how it shapes your daily habits, and ultimately how these small, consistent actions can profoundly redefine your very sense of self. Get ready to truly understand and harness the profound, often underestimated power of just one yes.
Okay, let's roll up our sleeves and unpack this. Our journey begins by really understanding the bedrock of this principle, why consistency matters so much to us on a fundamental level, and just as crucially, how it can sometimes actually hurt us. How it inadvertently keeps us bound to old patterns rather than propelling us forward into something better.
Indeed. The very foundation of this lies in what psychologists call the innate drive for cognitive consistency. Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory, which is really a cornerstone of social psychology, it posits that our brains are inherently wired to strive for harmony. We seek a comfortable alignment between our beliefs, our opinions, and our behaviors. When there's an inconsistency, a contradiction between what we think and what we do, or maybe even between two conflicting beliefs we hold, it doesn't just pass unnoticed. Oh no. It creates a palpable psychological discomfort. Think of it as an internal alarm bell ringing in your mind.
That's right. And that internal alarm isn't just a faint chime. The theory specifically states that the degree of this dissonance, this discomfort, it directly correlates with how important we think those conflicting elements are. Right. So if it's a minor belief clashing with a trivial action, perhaps the alarm is soft, maybe easily ignored. But if it's something fundamental, something deeply held about who you are, or maybe a core value conflicting with a significant action, that internal pressure to resolve the conflict becomes immense. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a powerful, often unconscious motivator that demands resolution.
And our brains, marvels of efficiency that they are, they're quite ingenious at reducing this discomfort. We're driven almost automatically to restore that internal harmony. We might achieve this by changing our beliefs to align with our actions, or perhaps by altering our actions to fit our beliefs. Sometimes we even change the way we perceive the situation altogether, essentially reframing it to make the inconsistency less jarring. A classic example is post-decision dissonance. After making a significant choice, like, say, buying a new car, individuals often mitigate the discomfort by actively emphasizing the positives of the chosen alternative and minimizing the negatives of the ones they rejected. You might find yourself seeking out advertising that aligns with your recent purchase, subconsciously reinforcing your choice and adding what Festinger called consonant cognitive elements, agreeable mental pieces to your internal world.
So essentially, we're looking for validation for our choices, even from outside things like ads or just from our own internal story, all just to quiet that internal alarm and get back to feeling okay.
Precisely. Another strategy for dissonance reduction involves establishing cognitive overlap, where we find commonalities between chosen and unchosen alternatives to create a more cohesive, less conflict-ridden understanding of a decision's context. And crucially, we often actively avoid information and situations that might heighten this internal conflict. This is why social groups can be so powerful, for better or for worse, as individuals seek confirmation of their existing beliefs from others, further adding to that consonance. For someone in recovery, this could manifest as avoiding places or people associated with their past behaviors, not just for practical reasons, but also to prevent that internal conflict that could challenge their new commitments. This fundamental need for internal harmony is a powerful, pervasive force, constantly shaping your perceptions and actions, often without you even realizing it. It's like a silent architect of your reality, always striving for consistency.
It's truly fascinating how our internal world seeks this balance, this sort of comfortable alignment. But it's not just about our beliefs and opinions. This drive for consistency shows up profoundly in our actions, especially through the sheer power of habits. James Clear, in his seminal work Atomic Habits, really zeroes in on this, explaining that habits are essentially automatic choices. They might take just a few seconds to complete, but their true influence is far, far greater because they significantly influence the conscious decisions that follow, effectively setting the stage for what comes next. Researchers estimate that a massive 40 to 50% of our actions on any given day are done purely out of habit. That's almost half of our waking lives just on autopilot.
And this is where Clear's highway analogy truly shines a light on this situation. He says, and I love this, habits are like the entrance ramp to a highway. They lead you down a path, and before you know it, you're speeding toward the next behavior. Oh. It's simply easier to continue what you're already doing than to consciously initiate something different, to take an exit or even turn around. This automaticity, while incredibly efficient for the brain, it saves cognitive energy. It can also become a powerful trap. We often find ourselves continuing negative behaviors or patterns simply because they become the default, the path of least resistance, the well-worn highway our brain prefers.
You see this everywhere, don't you? Think about it. Sitting through a bad movie for 2 hours, even though you stopped enjoying it after like 20 minutes. Or continuing to snack when you're already full just because the bag is open. Or that classic scenario of picking up your phone for just a second and then realizing 20 minutes have flown by, completely derailing whatever you were actually trying to focus on. These are all examples of habits, formed often without much conscious thought, dictating the choices we make even when we are trying to be intentional. For someone in recovery, this could be the urge to drive a certain route home that passes an old haunt, or reaching for a familiar comfort food during stress, even when they know it's not serving their journey.
That's a critical point, and it's deeply rooted in our neurological makeup. The brain's tendency towards routine and the neurological basis for conditioned reflexes, as so famously demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov's work with dogs, highlights this inertia. Pavlov observed that establishing the first conditioned reflex is often more difficult than establishing succeeding ones. This is because, as he noted, an alert state of the nervous system, free from other distracting nervous activity or foreign stimuli, is absolutely essential for forming a new, novel, conditioned reflex. If the environment is full of distractions, or if our nervous system isn't in that focused, alert state, creating new neural pathways is significantly harder. This powerfully illustrates why existing patterns, especially deeply ingrained habits, are so difficult to break. They have the inertia of a well-worn path, a deep rut that the brain effortlessly falls into, making it difficult to forge a new one.
So this powerful innate drive for consistency, this automaticity of habits, it isn't always our friend. In fact, it has a shadow side, a potentially darker implication for our well-being. Our brain's need for consistency can actually trap us in what Ernest Becker, the cultural anthropologist, called a character lie, an often unconscious identity or narrative about ourselves that might be self-limiting, even destructive. We might over-control and over-constrict ourselves, as Erik Erikson might put it, to fit a perceived role that we've adopted, even if that role doesn't serve our authentic growth or actively avoids genuine self-expression.
And that's a profound observation that resonates deeply in the context of recovery. Imagine for a moment trying to break out of a role you've always played, a script you've always followed, perhaps the struggling addict or the broken one, or maybe the unreliable friend, even if you consciously know that role is harming you. The consistent feedback you receive, both internally from your own ingrained thoughts and externally from others who might unwittingly hold you to that old identity, constantly reinforces that role. Jordan Peterson, the psychologist, emphasizes that if we continually reject new information, new experiences, or what he calls anomalous experiences, anything that challenges our current consistent identity, we actually weaken our personality. Anomaly, the unexpected, the unfamiliar, he argues, is spiritual food, the raw material out of which a personality is manufactured through voluntary exploratory behavior. Rejecting it, refusing to engage with what challenges your current self-story, makes the personality starved, senile, and increasingly terrified of change. We become brittle, unable to adjust to evolving circumstances, locked into an outdated self-definition.
So we're actively sabotaging our own growth and capacity for change by clinging too tightly to a comfortable, even if unhealthy, self-definition, even when that comfort is actually pain. That's a truly unsettling thought.
Precisely. Becker's perspective on perversions, for instance, offers a stark example of this drive for a consistent self, even if it's problematic. He suggests they can be seen as a kind of hyper-protest against species sameness, a desperate striving for individuality born out of weakness, and an inability to sustain a genuinely strong, adaptable identity, rather than originating from genuine strength. This illustrates how powerfully individuals will strive for any consistent sense of self, even if it's problematic or self-limiting, just to avoid the terrifying vacuum of inconsistency. To connect this back to dissonance, when the reward or punishment for compliance is merely adequate to induce behavior that contradicts our personal beliefs, dissonance is actually heightened. This internal conflict, if not addressed constructively, can paradoxically reinforce a negative identity, leading to individuals who become stubborn, defiant, and unable to reconcile themselves with life and its institutions, as Alfred Adler described. It's a vicious cycle where the internal discomfort leads to a more entrenched, rather than more adaptable, identity. It's holding on to the character lie, because changing feels too overwhelming, too inconsistent with the story you've always told yourself.
Wow. So the very mechanism that our brain uses to bring us comfort and internal harmony can actually lead to profound psychological and behavioral inflexibility, especially when we're talking about the challenging but vital journey of recovery. But here's where it gets really interesting and where our deep dive truly begins to offer solutions. What if we could hack this inherent drive for consistency? What if we could consciously, strategically leverage these powerful psychological principles to our advantage, rather than being trapped by them? What if we could use them as a launchpad for lasting change?
This brings us to the core of our deep dive today. The profound power of how small, seemingly insignificant yeses can build powerful, unstoppable momentum in your recovery. The first key principle here comes again from James Clear's Atomic Habits philosophy. The holy grail of habit change, the true path to lasting transformation. It isn't about one grand, heroic, transformative leap. It's not about making a single monumental decision and hoping that sheer willpower makes it stick forever. Instead, Clear argues, it's about 1,000 of them. Each small improvement, each tiny commitment is like adding a single grain of sand to the positive side of a delicate scale.
And I love that metaphor because it perfectly captures how it feels initially, right? When you first commit to meditating for just 1 minute, or reading one page of a recovery text, or saying no to a craving just once, it can feel utterly insignificant. Like that single grain of sand is washed away by the weight of the system, as Clear describes it. It doesn't seem to make a noticeable difference in the vast ocean of your old habits, your old identity. You might think, what's the point? This isn't enough.
Exactly. But this is precisely where patience and persistence become paramount, and where the true magic of consistency lies. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, as you continue to layer these small, consistent yeses on top of one another, something profound begins to happen. The scales of your life, the balance between your old self and your new self, they start to move. Each improvement, no matter how tiny, adds its weight. Eventually, if you stick with it, if you maintain that consistent effort, you will hit what Clear calls a tipping point. Suddenly, it feels easier to stick with good habits. The weight of the system, that very force of consistency we discussed earlier that once held you back, starts working for you rather than against you. The psychological benefit is immense. A small yes is a low-friction entry point, it's not intimidating, and it aligns perfectly with Clear's third law of behavior change. Make it easy.
So the goal is to make that initial step, that first yes, so incredibly simple, so almost trivial that we can't possibly say no, even on our toughest days. Is that kind of the key to getting the ball rolling?
Precisely. The 2-minute rule is a prime example of this in action. When you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. This makes it psychologically easier to initiate the behavior, which, let's be honest, is often the biggest hurdle to overcome. It's not about achieving a grand outcome in 2 minutes, it's about showing up. The sheer act of repetition is absolutely key to habit formation, and these small, manageable yeses dramatically increase the likelihood of that repetition. Think about it in terms of memory, too. Hermann Ebbinghaus's pioneering work on memory showed that repetitions build inner stability. Even a single repetition has an after effect, a saving of work when you try to recall it later, albeit not proportionally. This highlights the cumulative power of small, consistent efforts. Each little yes isn't just a single action. It's a deposit in your neural memory bank, strengthening the pathway, making the next yes a little bit easier. For someone in recovery, this could be committing to just 2 minutes of mindful breathing, or 2 minutes of journaling, or simply reading one recovery affirmation. It's the act of starting, not the length of the activity, that truly matters.
That's a powerful way to look at it, building up those deposits, those little bits of inner stability for new behaviors. Now, we circle back to cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling of inconsistency we talked about earlier that usually traps us. How can we actually use that to our advantage here? Can that internal alarm bell become like a lever for positive change and recovery?
Absolutely, and this is where the hack truly comes into play, a brilliant reversal of its usual function. By intentionally making a small, positive commitment, a single yes to a recovery-oriented action, you cleverly create a slight dissonance if your subsequent actions don't align with that commitment. This discomfort, however tiny it might initially be, then becomes a gentle internal push towards further positive action. For example, if you publicly or privately commit to meditating for just 1 minute a day, or maybe attending a specific recovery meeting and then you consider skipping it, you'll feel that little ping of inconsistency. That internal pressure, that innate desire to reduce dissonance, is precisely what we want to leverage. It's your brain saying, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't align with what you said you'd do.
So it's not about feeling terrible or guilty for not doing something, but recognizing that little bit of friction, that internal ping, as a sign that your brain wants to be consistent with the new commitment, the new identity you're trying to build. It's almost like your internal accountability partner.
Exactly. This is where the concept of forced compliance can be used for good, but in a very gentle, self-directed way. If the pressure to comply with a new positive behavior is moderate, not overwhelming, not punitive, but just enough to nudge you to initiate the action, and crucially, you begin to see even the slightest benefits from that behavior, it can predispose you to change your private opinion to align with that public behavior. The key insight here is profound. The initial commitment doesn't require full internal belief. You don't have to feel 100% committed or sure you'll succeed. It just requires the action. Over time, the actions literally shape the belief. This is the hack. You start with the behavior to change the cognition, rather than waiting for the cognition to change the behavior. It's a powerful bottom-up approach to transformation.
That's a real paradigm shift from how many of us think about change. We're often told to believe first, then act. But here the action creates the belief, especially when that initial belief might be fragile in recovery.
And this process can move an individual, as Abraham Maslow described, from being propelled primarily by deficiency motivation, seeking external satisfactions to fill a perceived void or lack to growth motivation, where satisfaction comes intrinsically from realizing one's own potentialities and moving towards self-actualization. You become less dependent on external validation, on external fixes, and more reliant on your internal capacity for growth and self-fulfillment. For someone in recovery, this means moving beyond simply avoiding a substance or behavior to actively building a life filled with purpose and self-generated satisfaction, where each small yes feels like a step towards becoming more fully themselves.
And to make those behaviors stick, to truly embed this new growth motivation, it's not just about willpower. It's about literally rewiring our brains. This brings us to the critical role of repetition, consistently laying down new neural pathways. Repeated positive actions performed over and over strengthen these pathways. It's like carving a new, smoother path through a dense forest. The more you walk it, the deeper and clearer it becomes, making those actions more automatic and less effortful over time.
That's a perfect analogy. Pavlov's insights into conditioned reflexes are highly relevant here. He observed that while the establishment of the first conditioned reflex is often more difficult, subsequent succeeding ones become significantly easier. This is because, as we discussed, an alert state of the nervous system, free from other competing nervous activity, is essential for the initial conditioning. But once that initial pathway is laid, once that new bed is started, subsequent related actions find it easier to follow. William James, the father of American psychology, spoke of this beautifully with his idea of a mental bed. He said, "A process fills its old bed in a different way from that in which it makes a new bed. Familiar percepts, like familiar negative habits, they have a character of ease because they're well-practiced, deep grooves. But the more you repeat a new positive action, the more ingrained and easy it becomes, creating a new bed or pathway for that healthy behavior in your brain."
So those initial difficult single yeses are literally building a new, more comfortable, more automatic route for future positive actions. It's like physical brain change at work.
Precisely. This is the long-term impact we're aiming for. These small, consistent yeses gradually construct new positive beds in your brain, making the healthy choice feel natural, automatic, and like the default, rather than a constant struggle against an old bed of negative habits. It moves from being an effortful decision, draining your willpower, to an effortless flow, a fundamental change in your neurological landscape. For someone in recovery, this means reaching for a healthy coping mechanism becomes as automatic as an old addiction used to be, simply because the brain has been consistently retrained.
So we've talked about how our brains strive for consistency, how habits automate that consistency, and how we can flip the script by using small, consistent yeses to build new momentum, even using dissonance to our advantage. Now, let's explore the ultimate goal here. How this accumulation of consistent action can actually cultivate a brand new identity, one that aligns with the person you truly aspire to be, especially on the profound journey of recovery.
This is where we move beyond just changing behaviors and begin to truly change who you are at your core. Ernest Becker introduced the concept of the character lie, the often unconscious narrative or role we adopt to feel heroic and significant within our cultural framework, to feel safe. While this lie can provide comfort and a sense of belonging, a stable identity, it can also be profoundly limiting, keeping us stuck in roles that don't serve our authentic growth. For someone in recovery, this might be the addict identity, the person who always struggles, who always falls short. Leveraging consistency for recovery means actively challenging and transcending this deeply ingrained character lie, consciously stepping out of that old narrative.
That sounds like a monumental task, especially when you've lived with that character lie for so long. How does one even begin to move beyond such a deeply ingrained self-story?
It's a fundamental, profound shift, moving from what Becker termed cultural heroism, performing within everyday social schemes, living up to conventional expectations, even if they're negative, to cosmic heroism. This is where you connect your secret inner self, authentic talent, deepest feelings of uniqueness, inner yearning for absolute significance, to the very ground of creation. In essence, consistent positive actions, even the smallest ones, start to subtly, powerfully rewrite your internal identity script. The 5 psychological truths, for instance, suggest regularly updating your identity script through notes and reflections. This conscious affirmation, paired with consistent action, reinforces the new self you are actively building. This isn't just intellectual, it's deeply psychological. Carl Jung's concept of the self refers to a superordinate personality encompassing both conscious and unconscious components, far larger than the ego. Consistent engagement with self-development through these actions helps integrate these aspects, moving towards a process of individuation, becoming your whole, unique self. And William James reminds us that the central nucleus of the self is felt. It's not just an intellectual construct. It's something we have direct, sensible acquaintance with, an embodied sense of who we are. Consistent actions contribute to this felt sense of self, creating a new, authentic internal experience of who you are becoming rather than who you were.
So it's about making our actions align with the deeper, truer sense of self we're discovering, rather than the old lie. And for that, to sustain such a monumental internal shift, we absolutely need to believe that such change is even possible for us, don't we? That's got to be a core ingredient.
Exactly. Which brings us perfectly to Carol Dweck's groundbreaking mindset theory. A growth mindset is the fundamental belief that you can change, that you can get smarter, more capable, and that you can improve your abilities and character with effort, opportunities, and support. This belief is absolutely crucial for sustained recovery. Without it, the journey can feel insurmountable. In contrast, a fixed mindset views talent and abilities as largely untrainable inherent traits that you either have or don't. This mindset often leads to derailment by setbacks because they're seen not as learning opportunities, but as definitive proof of inherent inadequacy or a permanent flaw, reinforcing that old character lie.
And I can clearly see how each of those small, consistent yeses plays a direct role in reinforcing that growth mindset. Every time you successfully complete a minute of meditation or say no to a craving or read that one page of recovery literature, it's concrete, undeniable evidence that yes, you can do it and yes, you are changing. It's like collecting small victories that build up your belief in yourself.
Precisely. Each small success, each consistent action, provides concrete evidence that change is possible, slowly but surely reinforcing the growth mindset within you. And here's a crucial nuance. It's not just about the outcome, it's about the process. We must emphasize the importance of acknowledging and celebrating the process of change, the effort, the strategy employed, the perseverance demonstrated, rather than just the immediate outcome. This aligns with tying accomplishments to the effort engaged in, which helps both children and adults understand that consistent effort leads to learning and growth, not just that talent is innate. With a growth mindset, setbacks don't become proof of inherent inadequacy. Instead, they transform into valuable opportunities to learn, adjust your strategy, and do better next time. This resilience, this ability to bounce back and adapt, is a powerful byproduct of consistent effort and the deep-seated belief in one's capacity to evolve.
So we're building a new identity, fueled by the belief that we can change bit by bit. But what gives that change direction? What makes all these small yeses feel like they're leading somewhere truly meaningful, rather than just being a series of isolated tasks? There needs to be a larger context, doesn't there?
Absolutely. That's where purpose comes in. And Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow highlights its supreme importance. He suggests that a unifying purpose acts like a powerful magnetic field that attracts and organizes your psychic energy, your attention, and your focus. This magnetic field transforms day-to-day actions, even the mundane or difficult ones, into a seamless flow experience. Without such an overarching purpose, even a well-ordered consciousness, full of good intentions and small habits, can ultimately lack meaning, leading to apathy, a sense of aimlessness, or the debilitating feeling that psychic energy is being wasted, because it's not contributing to your own long-range goals or deeper values.
I think many people, especially in the early stages of recovery, can deeply relate to that feeling of wasted energy or a lack of direction, especially if their daily tasks feel disconnected from a larger, compelling vision for their life. It's not enough to just stop. You need something to move towards.
Precisely. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, articulated this powerfully with his concept of logotherapy, which centers entirely on the human will to meaning. He argued that our primary motivational force is a search for meaning. In cases of neurogenic neurosis, the frustration of this will to meaning, a spiritual or existential vacuum, the appropriate therapy involves helping the individual recognize a goal and mission in life. The single yes approach we're discussing provides the practical, actionable steps, the concrete daily choices, to move towards that larger, personally discovered purpose. Each small, consistent commitment becomes a tangible step on the path toward this overarching goal, imbuing daily efforts with profound meaning. It makes the effort feel less like a burden, less like a chore, and more like genuine progress towards one's mission, one's reason for being. Daniel Pink's work reinforces this. True satisfaction and motivation depend on having the right goals, not just any goals. Pursuing purpose is often a path of delayed gratification. Yes, but it yields far greater payoffs, a deeper sense of fulfillment, and, interestingly, often significantly less competition because so few people commit to it wholeheartedly.
This all sounds incredibly powerful, a truly holistic approach to change and recovery. But for our listeners, the question always comes down to, how do we actually put this into practice? What are the concrete day-to-day strategies for implementing this single yes approach and ensuring it sticks, especially when we're talking about something as challenging and transformative as recovery?
It's not just about internal resolve. It's fundamentally about setting yourself up for success by designing your environment and your choices. We need to actively engineer our lives, to support our new positive habits. James Clear again provides excellent, actionable laws for making good habits easier. Firstly, make it obvious. Design your environment so that cues for good habits are visible and unavoidable, making them impossible to ignore. For example, if you're trying to drink more water as part of your overall health and recovery, keep a filled water bottle on your desk right in your line of sight. If you want to start a gratitude practice, keep a journal and pen on your pillow.
So it's about engineering your world to make the right choice, the path of least resistance almost, making it the only obvious path.
Precisely. Secondly, make it easy. Reduce the friction associated with the desired behavior. The 2-minute rule, as we discussed, is paramount here. If a new habit takes less than 2 minutes, it's harder to put off. But also, consider one-time actions that lead to better habits. This could mean setting up automatic bill payments for a recovery-related service, or scheduling your workout or a support group meeting in advance, making it a firm appointment. For someone avoiding a specific place or trigger, a one-time action could be rerouting your GPS permanently to avoid that area. Thirdly, make it attractive. Temptation bundling is a great strategy here, where you pair a desired action, something you want to do, with a necessary one, something you need to do. Listen to your favorite podcast only while you're exercising or doing a mindfulness practice, or allow yourself to enjoy your favorite specific tea only during your journaling time.
That makes so much sense. You leverage a craving for one thing to make another, more beneficial thing happen. What's the last law?
And finally, make it satisfying. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. Focus on the immediate satisfaction of completing that small yes. It doesn't have to be a grand reward, just the feeling of accomplishment, the check mark on your list, the mental pat on the back. Acknowledging that small win creates a positive feedback loop that encourages future repetition.
Beyond these, are there ways to cement our commitment even before the action, to almost sort of pre-program ourselves for success?
Absolutely. The 5 psychological truths emphasizes pre-commitment. Writing the criteria for your decisions before you see the options. For recovery, this could mean writing down your commitment to sobriety, including specific boundaries, before you go into a social situation where alcohol will be present. You're making the decision when you're in a clear state of mind, not in the moment of temptation. You can also run a pre-mortem by imagining your recovery efforts failing in the future and then designing safeguards now to prevent those foreseen failures. Albert Bandura's concept of reciprocal determinism illustrates why this is so effective. Behavior is a continuous reciprocal interaction between personal, behavioral, and environmental determinants. Your carefully designed environment will influence your behavior, which in turn influences your personal resolve, which then informs your environment, creating a powerful, virtuous cycle.
That's a truly comprehensive toolkit for building habits and reinforcing commitment. But before we can even begin to change a habit or even pre-commit to a new path, we first have to be profoundly aware of it. So many of our patterns, especially the ones that lead us astray, are automatic, almost invisible to us. How do we shine a light on those hidden patterns?
Indeed. Increasing awareness is a crucial first step, particularly in recovery, where triggers and ingrained responses can be subtle. Clear suggests practical tools like the habit scorecard, a simple exercise where you list all your daily actions from waking up to going to bed, and then mark them as positive, negative, or neutral for your recovery goals. This exercise brings non-conscious behaviors to light, making you aware of patterns you didn't even realize existed. Another simple but effective technique is pointing and calling, where you verbalize your actions to raise awareness from a non-conscious habit to a more conscious level. For instance, if you're about to reach for a comfort snack, you might say aloud, "I am reaching for a snack because I feel stressed." This simple act creates a pause, an opportunity for conscious intervention.
That sounds like an intentional effort to bring what's hidden into the light, even for the most difficult parts of our past. But what about deeper, perhaps trauma-related patterns that might fuel self-sabotage?
For those deeper, often trauma-related patterns, the work of Daniel Goleman and Bessel van der Kolk is vital. They speak about the power of putting feelings into words, retelling traumatic events as vividly as possible, and putting sensory details and feelings into words. This process, often facilitated by therapy, brings those raw, body-based memories under the control of the neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for language and reasoning, making them more understandable and manageable. It's a process of pendulating between states of exploration and safety, between language and body, moving back and forth from the difficult memory to a safe, grounded state, which is key to trauma resolution and breaking its hold on present behavior. It's about consciously processing what was once an unconscious, overwhelming reaction. And building on this, Abraham Maslow cautioned against what he called rubricized recognition, the tendency to stereotype and categorize incoming information based on existing mental frameworks, thereby reinforcing the status quo. Instead, we should strive for fresh, idiosyncratic attending, truly seeing things as they are, without the filter of old assumptions or the character lie. This act of awareness helps us break free from simply reinforcing the past and open ourselves to new possibilities.
Recovery or any significant personal change is rarely a solo journey. Our social environment plays a huge role, either supporting or hindering our efforts. So once we're aware and committed, how do we effectively leverage social support and communication to reinforce these positive changes and our new identity?
Social groups are incredibly powerful, both for good and ill. Festinger's theory on dissonance reduction highlights how individuals often seek confirmation of their beliefs for others, adding consonant cognitive elements that reinforce their internal consistency. This can be strategically used to reinforce new, positive beliefs about your recovery. By sharing your commitments and progress with a supportive group, like a recovery community, you gain external validation that strengthens your internal consistency. It makes your new identity more real, more solidified. For effective communication within these support systems, or even with family and friends, Daniel Goleman and the authors of Attached offer a valuable framework. It's crucial to express your needs, thoughts, and feelings clearly, rather than resorting to attacks, blame, or defensiveness. They suggest the XYZ formula. When you did X, it made me feel Y, and I'd rather you did Z instead.
So it's about being direct and specific, focusing on your feelings and needs rather than making accusations. Can you give us an example of how that might sound in a recovery context?
Absolutely. Instead of saying, you never support me, you always leave tempting things around, which is an accusation, you might say. When you left that bottle of wine on the counter, X, it made me feel really anxious and unsupported in my sobriety. And I'd really appreciate it if you could put it away in a cupboard instead. Z. This fosters understanding, allows others to meet your needs, which are often determined by your attachment style and deeper emotional patterns, and avoids the destructive patterns of blame that can derail recovery efforts. But while social influence is powerful, individuals also possess self-reactive capacities to control their feelings, thoughts, and actions, as Bandura noted. Philip Zimbardo's work, particularly his insights into the Lucifer effect, reminds us to be vigilant against undesired influence or manipulative control, especially when it's personally disadvantageous or contradicts your recovery goals. The paradoxes of heroism show us that many who act heroically insist they just did what anyone should have done, highlighting that collective action and individual courage can resist problematic systems. You have agency and the power to choose your influences. And finally, as Susan Cain points out, we should avoid the myth of catharsis, that venting anger lets off steam. Instead, focus on constructive communication. Your support system is there to help you build, not just to vent in a way that perpetuates negativity. It's about channeling that energy into positive action and growth.
Okay, this has been a truly illuminating deep dive into the profound, often hidden power of a single yes. We've traveled from understanding the fundamental, almost invisible psychological wiring that drives our innate need for consistency and its potential pitfalls, to the liberation of actively hacking that very bias with small, consistent yeses. We've seen how each tiny commitment, like a grain of sand, gradually accumulates to create a powerful tipping point, building unstoppable momentum and making new, healthy choices feel not just possible, but psychologically easier, a natural part of your evolving identity.
And we've linked this explicitly to the very act of self-creation, to cultivating a new, authentic identity aligned with your deepest aspirations, especially on the challenging but ultimately rewarding path of recovery. You've learned about the innate power of cognitive dissonance, how habits automate our lives, the transformative effect of embracing a growth mindset, and the guiding magnetic force of purpose. We've also explored practical strategies, from designing your environment for success and making powerful pre-commitments, to shining a light on non-conscious patterns through awareness tools like the Habit Scorecard and the profound act of putting feelings into words, and finally, leveraging social support through effective, conscious communication. Is a holistic, integrated approach to understanding and enacting lasting positive change in your life.
It truly has been. So if our personality is, in part, manufactured from the raw material of the unknown through voluntary exploratory behavior, as Jordan Peterson suggests, and a consistent positive yes creates new neural pathways and a new sense of self, as thinkers like James, Clear, and Festinger have shown, then what truly defines you at any given moment? Is it the sum of your past consistent actions, the weight of your old habits and character lies? Or is it the courageous single yes you commit to in the present, fundamentally reshaping your future, forging a new identity, one small step at a time?
How might recognizing this profound personal agency, this power to literally construct your future self through intentional small acts of consistency, fundamentally alter your relationship with daily choices and your deeply personal path to recovery? It's a question that puts the power squarely, unequivocally in your hands every single day.
It's a lot to chew on, but hopefully it's also incredibly empowering. I want to encourage you, our listener, to consider just one single small yes you can commit to this week. Just one. And then observe. See how that tiny commitment, that deliberate act of consistency, might begin to ripple outward, initiating your own profound journey of recovery and self creation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time with more insights.